There's a place in Barcelona that doesn't exist, and yet, once you've been there, you can never truly leave it. Carlos Ruiz Zafón called it the cemetery of forgotten books, a labyrinth of shelves where lost stories wait patiently for the one reader who will keep them alive. It's the perfect symbol for what The Shadow of the Wind actually is, not simply a novel, but a spell. A spell about grief, obsession, memory, and the terrifying, beautiful risk of loving something or someone with your whole soul. This is a story that has quietly rearranged the inner lives of millions of readers, because underneath its gothic mystery and its rain-soaked streets, Zafón buried something rarer than plot: wisdom. Real, hard-won wisdom about how fate is built one choice at a time, how the past never stays buried, and how the books we love end up loving us back, shaping who we become long after we've closed the final page. Today, we're walking through 7 of those lessons, the ones that don't just explain the story, but might just explain a little bit of you. 1. Every story deserves a guardian. When 10-year-old Daniel Sempere is taken by his father into the cemetery of forgotten books, he's told an old rule: he must choose one book and forever become its protector. It sounds like a small ritual for a child. It isn't. It's the emotional center of gravity for the entire novel, the idea that a story, once it touches you, becomes your responsibility. Not because someone forces you to carry it, but because love, once given, asks something of you in return. Zafón is telling us something profound about art and memory here. Nothing survives on its own. A song, a painting, a person's name, all of it depends on someone choosing to remember, to protect, to pass it on. Daniel doesn't know it yet, but by picking Julián Carax's forgotten novel off that shelf, he isn't saving a book, he's saving a life, a secret, a piece of history the world tried to erase. And maybe that's the real lesson hiding in the dust of that cemetery. The things and the people we choose to hold on to are the only ones that get to keep existing. 2. Love that devours is not love. At the tragic heart of The Shadow of the Wind lies the doomed romance between Julián Carax and Penelope Aldaya, a love so intense it becomes almost indistinguishable from ruin. Their story is achingly romantic on the surface, but Zafón is far too wise a writer to let it stay there. Underneath the beauty is a warning. When love becomes obsession, when it starts feeding on secrecy, jealousy, and possession instead of trust, it stops protecting the people inside it. It starts destroying them. This is where the novel quietly splits its definition of love in two. There's love that isolates, the kind Julián and Penelope share, hidden, forbidden, and ultimately fatal. And there's love that opens a life outward, like the slow, patient, unglamorous love that grows between Daniel and Bia, built on honesty instead of mystery. Zafón seems to be asking us, gently but insistently, which kind of love are you choosing? The kind that locks 2 people in a room until the air runs out, or the kind that lets both of you breathe? And honestly, if a story like this one is already pulling something out of you, if you're starting to understand why millions of readers call it one of the most emotional novels they've ever finished, you don't actually need to buy the physical copy to experience it. You can listen to The Shadow of the Wind as an audiobook through Amazon Audible, right in your car, at work, or during those moments in the day when sitting down with a physical book just isn't possible. Right now, you can try the subscription for practically nothing, and I'll leave the link down in the description if you want to give it a shot. 3. The past doesn't stay buried. It waits. Inspector Fumero is one of literature's quietest kinds of monster, not because he's larger than life, but because he's proof that unresolved cruelty from the past doesn't disappear with time. It waits, it changes shape, and eventually it comes looking for the people who thought they'd escaped it. Through Fumero and through the slow unraveling of Julian Carax's hidden history, Zafón builds an entire novel around one uncomfortable truth: you cannot outrun what you refuse to face. This is more than Gothic atmosphere. It's a mirror held up to real life. How many of us carry old wounds we've simply agreed not to look at, hoping silence will do the work that honesty should do? The novel suggests it never does. Barcelona itself, gray and rain-soaked and layered with Civil War scars, becomes a character built entirely from this idea. A city, like a person, cannot fully move forward while it's still pretending its past never happened. 4. We become the stories we tell about ourselves. Julian Carax spends much of the novel as a name more than a man, a writer who seems to have reinvented himself, erased himself, or perhaps been erased by everyone around him. Identity in The Shadow of the Wind is never fixed, it's authored. Characters change their names, hide their pasts, or quite literally burn evidence of who they used to be, and Zafón lets us sit with an uncomfortable question underneath all of it. How much of who we are is discovered, and how much of it is simply a story we decided to tell, then kept telling until it became true? There's something strangely freeing in that idea, even as it's unsettling. If identity can be authored, it can also be rewritten. Daniel spends the entire novel trying to uncover who Julian Carax really was, but by the final page, the deeper journey has actually been his own, piecing together who he is by understanding who he refuses to become. Zafón seems to whisper page after page that the most dangerous thing isn't losing your story, it's letting someone else write it for you. 5. Fate is a mirror we build with our own choices. The eeriest thread running through the novel is the growing realization that Daniel's life is beginning to echo Julian's. The same city, the same kind of love, even some of the same dangers decades apart. It would be easy to read this as pure destiny, as if some cosmic hand had already written both of their lives before they began. But Zafón is more interested in something subtler. Fate here isn't a fixed script, it's a pattern that only repeats when nobody stops to notice it. That distinction matters enormously. The novel isn't arguing that we're powerless against the past, it's arguing that history repeats itself precisely when we stay unconscious of it. Daniel's real power, the thing that ultimately separates his ending from Julian's, isn't some magical exemption from fate. It's awareness. The moment he truly understands the story he's been unconsciously living inside of, he finally gets the chance to choose a different one. 6. Real loyalty is the rarest kind of magic. If Julian and Penelope represent the novel's warning about love, Fermín Romero de Torres represents its answer. Broken by his past, hilarious, paranoid, endlessly resourceful, Fermín becomes Daniel's closest ally, and their friendship is, quietly, one of the most moving relationships in the entire book. Where the romantic stories in this novel are shadowed by secrecy and tragedy, the friendship between Daniel and Fermín is loud, funny, unglamorous, and completely unconditional. Zafón uses this friendship almost as relief, a reminder that not every meaningful bond has to be tragic to be profound. Fermín simply shows up, again and again, in danger, in grief, in absurd late-night schemes. He shows up. And maybe that's the quiet lesson buried in their friendship. The people who stay, who choose you again and again without needing a dramatic reason to do so, are doing something every bit as extraordinary as the great doomed loves at the center of the story. Loyalty, plain and steady, might be the least romanticized form of magic in the whole book, and maybe in life too. 7. Redemption is always still possible. By the novel's final pages, nearly every major character has been forced to confront the damage of their past, some destroyed by it, others transformed. Fermin himself carries a hidden history of trauma and shame, yet he becomes one of the most fiercely loving, loyal presences in the book. Zafón refuses to let his characters be defined only by their worst chapters. Even Julian Carax, buried under decades of grief and disfigurement, is given, at last, a kind of peace. This is perhaps the most hopeful thread running underneath all that gothic darkness. The novel never promises an easy ending, but it insists again and again that darkness is not the final word. People can be forgiven, stories can be rewritten, even a life shaped by tragedy can still end in something close to grace. And maybe that's the real gift Zafón leaves us with, not a guarantee that life won't hurt us, but a quiet, stubborn hope that it doesn't have to end there. Before we close the book on this one, if these 7 lessons resonated with you even a little, remember that you don't need to track down a physical copy to experience The Shadow of the Wind for yourself. The full audiobook is available through Amazon Audible, so you can walk through Zafón's Barcelona while commuting, working, or anywhere reading just isn't an option. The trial subscription is practically free right now, and you'll find the link waiting for you in the description below. In the end, The Shadow of the Wind isn't really a book about a missing writer, or a burned library, or even a doomed love affair. It's a book about what it means to be haunted by the people we love, the choices we make, and the stories that refuse to let us go until we finally understand them. Zafón reminds us that every book we truly love ends up reading us back, and maybe that's the real magic hiding in that cemetery of forgotten books. Some stories don't just survive because we remember them. We survive because of what they teach us. Remember to subscribe, comment, like, and see you next time.